Hello again, J-Spot peeps, and welcome back to the J-Spot. I'm your host, Mr. J. And for those of you who have subscribed already, thank you. I recently eclipsed 600 subscribers. Today, as a matter of fact, and I really do appreciate your support. And for those of you who are stopping by for the first time, welcome. And please, while you're here, if you enjoy this content, make sure you give us a like, subscribe, share this content with your family and friends, drop us a comment, and make sure that you hit that notification bell to be notified of content going forward. Several years ago, I became an alcoholic and drug counselor intern. I don't do that anymore, but I did it for several years. I still work in the field, but not as a counselor. And during that time, back in 2019, I started in 2018, but in 2019, I was still writing articles for newspapers and magazines. And one of the articles that I wrote because I had become involved in drug and alcohol counseling. And I remembered from years before, when I was growing up, I used to see these commercials on television in black and white about Mother's Little Helper, which is what drug companies called Valium and amphetamines and downers and things like that they would market to middle-class white women who were supposedly overwhelmed by their duties as a mother or a wife. And so I decided to write an article about it titled Mother's Little Helper, the Precursor to Today's Opioid Epidemic. Let's get right to it, shall we? Some of you might, and then some of you may not, remember back in the day when people would say something like, "She's resting. I gave her a sedative." Better still, have you ever wondered how women, white women in particular, on television in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, how they mustered up the energy to float around the house all day long in heels, singing "I Feel Pretty"? Well, the answer to these questions could be found on the shelves of household medicine cabinets. Whether they be amphetamines, which were uppers, or sedatives, downers, it seemed as if the problem of upper and middle class women could all be solved with Mother's Little Helper. The term was originally assigned to tranquilizers, but was marketed in ads targeting housewives as a panacea for a variety of stressors associated with being a wife or mother or both. Feeling down? Pop a pill. Husband not paying you enough attention? Pop a pill. Children getting on your nerves? Pop a pill. That upper got you too jittery? Pop a pill. Unable to cope with situational stress? Pop a pill. That downer got you too lethargic? Pop a pill. According to the drug companies, there was no circumstance that arose which could not be handled with the popping of a pill. Given the history of people's aversion to dealing with life's problems head on, why then are we angry with drug companies and not with ourselves regarding the current opioid crisis? A crisis that has long been in the making. As a former alcohol and drug counselor intern, well, at the time I was an alcohol and drug counselor intern, I would always ask clients, how were you introduced to drugs? Oftentimes the response would be, well, I found some of my mother's pills in the medicine cabinet. Next thing I knew, I was hooked. Now, this in no way absolves anyone else of their responsibility, and in no way dismisses other means of introduction. It does, however, speak volumes about attitudes concerning privilege, status, and a fundamental disinterest in developing coping skills from one generation to another. Unlike African Americans, whose time in this country has demanded that we develop coping skills and have done so absent medications, whites have largely been immune to such demands. This might account for the fact that more whites are dying from overdoses than blacks and Latinos. Couple this with the absurd belief that blacks are not as sensitive to pain as whites and therefore are not prescribed opioids as frequently, and you begin to see why blacks, to a degree, were being spared. Not that blacks have not had their time in the barrel regarding a drug epidemic. We all remember the crack epidemic of the 80s, a CIA-led operation which funded then-President Reagan's Iran-Contra guns for drug foreign policy scandal. The difference, however, between now and then is that while black families and neighborhoods were deliberately destroyed by its own government and being labeled animals and criminals, no lawsuits for them. Black people doing time. The ones fortunate enough not to lose their lives were locked up and or had their careers ruined, as opposed to the present crisis where whites are labeled innocent victims and the hues and cries of outrage flood the airwaves along with calls for sensible solutions and lawsuits. White people doing treatment. Americans would do themselves a huge favor by recognizing this one immutable fact. If you don't teach your children coping skills while they're sober, people like me, former counselors and former counselors, will have to. And if people like me have to do it, it will be much more difficult for your child to learn, provided they want to let go the apron strings of Mother's Little Helper. Thank you once again, J-Spot peeps, for spending some of your valuable time here with me in the J-Spot. And while you were here, if you enjoyed this content, please subscribe, drop us a comment, share this content with your family and your friends. And please come back to see me, because we have a lot more discovering to do and a lot more purpose to pursue. In the meantime, peace.